Today I wanted to talk a little bit about snowshoes, at least what I know about them. I'm no expert by any means with snowshoes, snowshoeing, or anything like that, but I've done a fair amount of it to say that at least I know a little bit. So I wanted to first talk about the different styles of snowshoes, less, the modern technical type stuff. Again, I like more traditional stuff, so that's what I'm going to be talking about, traditional style snowshoes and things of that nature. So I wanted to talk through the 3 to 4 different styles. There's a bunch of different styles depending on what part of the world they were used in, the names that were given to them in those particular areas. And actually there's probably 3 main styles and then a bunch of variations off of that. So we'll talk about those first. We'll get into some of the advantages, disadvantages of each, and then we'll talk about bindings. Alright, so our first design here is known as a Bearpaw. They're also referred to as a modified Bearpaw, which this one may be. Green Mountain Snowshoe or Appalachian Snowshoe. The characteristics of these are they're typically oval, sometimes even almost round, but generally have a taper towards the back of the snowshoe, which is here. They are good for mountainous terrain, thickly vegetated wooded areas and stuff like that, because they don't have the big long tail, so you can get between trees and stuff like that. They're also made for firmer type snow, and being shorter, again, maneuverability, they're easier to manipulate, going up and down mountains and stuff like that, and or through the woods. So again, I've seen these things almost look completely round, and I've seen them very, very wide. So these are good for what I already talked about. The disadvantages to something like this is they're not as fast as your beaver tail or whatever, your longer type snowshoes. So it's gonna be hard to travel, lots of ground in a short amount of time. So not very fast, to put it simply. Alright, the next one that I just referred to is called a Huron design. They're typically, the Huron design, they're also called, Michigan Snowshoe, Maine Snowshoe, Algonquin, and Beavertail. They're usually oval, or teardrop shape, and they typically have the long tail on the back, hence Beavertail. These will track, again, a lot faster than the Bearpaws. So, wide open spaces across lakes and or trails, stuff like that. These will make their money. So you can go further, a bit faster, obviously, than the Bearpaws. Disadvantages to something like this is they can tend to be, clumsy or not so maneuverable in a heavily vegetated area or in deep powdery snow. So, there's a give and take, and obviously these things were made for different purposes, much like anything else we use. But they generally have a tip up at the toe where the Bearpaws don't. It's another characteristic that's different. But good pair of snowshoes. This one happens to be a 100th anniversary edition from LL Bean. Beautiful snowshoe. Come with some nice, looks like Occidental leather bindings, and again, we'll get to that, maybe in the next video. Third style of snowshoe is an Alaskan snowshoe, also called a pickerel, a trail snowshoe, cross-country snowshoe, things like that. They're similar to the beaver tail, except they're definitely longer. They're usually 4 to 5 feet long, somewhere in there. And then in the back, it's almost a match between the back of this type of Bearpaw, where some of them are actually oval in the back, on the back end, or some of them have just a little nub for a tail there at the bottom. But they're generally a lot narrower, you know, hence pickerel or cross-country snowshoe, you know, reminiscent cross-country skis. So they're very long and narrow. They're very good for wide open areas, trails, lakes, things of that nature, and they're very good in deep powdery snow. So that's the advantages of those. Obviously disadvantages, all the same as like the beaver tail here, heavily vegetated areas, mountains, stuff like that, hills, not so good probably. Alright, and last but not least, there is a Ojibwa style snowshoe. Very, very reminiscent of the beaver tail. The big difference in that one, the toe is more pointed and more curled up, and it's actually made out of the frame of it is actually made out of two different pieces of wood, and it's fastened, you know, at the top and the bottom to keep them together, obviously. Where this beaver tail is one piece of wood that's been steam bent. So that's the big difference there, but they look almost identical, except for the pointed tip in the front, really. Same teardrop design and stuff like that. So that may be a different variation of the same thing. So those are basically the three types of snowshoes, you know, some of the characteristics, some advantages, disadvantages. And again, I'm not an expert at this by any means, but I wanted to talk about it because I'm going to be doing a lot more of this sort of thing in the future. So hope you guys enjoyed that quick one on snowshoes. Next video, rather than talk about it here, I'll just shoot a different video. We'll talk about bindings, whether it's ones like these leather ones that come with the snowshoe or traditional style bindings, some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages of each, and then we'll show you how to, you know, tie on a traditional binding that was taught to me. That's pretty quick and easy, and lessens some of the disadvantages. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.